Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Hello. Welcome back to Courageous Conversations. I'm Dr. Peter Weinstein. I'd like to welcome my partner.
Hello, I'm Philip Nelson. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast. We really appreciate all of our 15 to 20 regular listeners and all those who are trying us for the first time. We hope we're entertaining, but more importantly, we hope we're thought-provoking and action-provoking. Peter, how are things going with you?
Things are going well. Just a quick shout out to Nicole for helping to bring this stuff to light as well. Things are good. I mean, I'm busy being busy and trying to assimilate and drink from a fire hose of information. You know, I think, Phil, when we were doing our pre-talk, we were just talking about there's so much to talk about that we're just going to talk about whatever comes to mind first and maybe small bite-sized snippets. I actually do a presentation for groups, and it's really focused on picking topics that anybody wants to talk about and throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. I call it monkey chat because it's just like throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. So let's start just throwing some crap, Phil. Just for our listeners, so you know, we are recording this on June 19th, also known as Juneteenth, which is my daughter's birthday. So she now is having a national celebration for her birthday every year.
So, that's about as good as being born on Christmas.
Yes.
Except that you don't get presents on Juneteenth.
No.
I find that to be a strange, quote, holiday, unquote. How do you celebrate and who celebrates being tricked or being held in the dark for 3 months? And you celebrate the day that you found out your enslavement had actually ended 3 months ago, so that you could get the crops in. It's an acknowledgement that should be made of how insidious slavery was and the impact it has had on this country. On the other hand, celebrating this particular day for both Black and white communities seems to be a stretch to incorporate the true message that should come out for this particular holiday. What do you think about that?
You know, what I think is that it's a date that has not been fully discussed. And I think there's a very large portion of the American population who really doesn't have an understanding of the significance of the date. I think the events that it acknowledges warrant acknowledgement. But what I don't think we have done is to fully share in the story that had got us to June 19th and got June 19th to the point that it is an acknowledged and significant date on the calendar. So I think it came very quickly. And Phil, I'll be honest with you, and I think we did this at a podcast at some point in time. Prior to you and I talking, and prior to this, the George Floyd, June 19th was just my daughter's birthday. It really did not have any significant recognition. And I would suggest that in the time since 5 years ago when we started having these conversations, I have become obviously much more aware of its significance. But, you know, if you think back 10 years ago, in the global scheme of things, did June 19th even come up in conversation?
No. But then again, there are people who are trying to erase that the Holocaust happened too.
Absolutely.
You know, and now we have people who are trying to rewrite the effect of slavery. I mean, when DeSantis tells us that they did us a favor by having us in slavery because we learned something from that experience, tells you exactly how the lack of empathy and the promotion of racial superiority affects how people look at historical events. And so, on the one hand, Juneteenth is actually a celebration of the official end of slavery because a Union general happened to go through Galveston, Texas, and discovered that they were still enslaving. They were still in that master slave relationship. The only reason the slaves in that town discovered it is because the power structure at the time was forced to tell them, which was, some people say that it was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, I can accept the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued at a time when the Civil War was still being fought. And so that was not necessarily when slavery ended. That was when Abraham Lincoln used his presidential powers to try to entice slaves to revolt and join the Union in fighting the states that he was fighting. But the actual end of the Civil War was the actual end of slavery, which was about a year or two later after that. So whether it was 6 months or 2 years before slaves in Galveston understood that they were free doesn't matter. What matters is how oppressive societies can impose their will, even in a democratic process.
What I think is important, without spending a lot of time, is that our listeners take the time and just do a little bit of research and understand what Juneteenth is. So when it comes about next year and following years, that there's a better understanding and appreciation. And I think this is one of those areas where education will allow you to just understand the significance of the date, the events that surround the date, and at least be knowledgeable in whatever position. And I'm not going to tell you what position or feelings to have, but just to give yourself a foundation and understand why Juneteenth is what it is in terms of a recognition. Because I think so many people don't understand what it's all about.
But so many people don't understand what a lot of our holidays are about, or care to hold true to the purpose of the holiday. It's just a day off, and that's enough for some people. When Martin Luther King was acknowledged with a holiday, I felt that that's not what he fought for. He didn't fight for recognition through a national holiday. And throughout my life, my celebration of his day, of his holiday, was to go to work, because that's what he fought for. Equitable access to any job that's available for anyone who qualified for it. And and I grew up in a southern town that had there were no black firemen or fire people in the fire department. There were no black officers in the police department. Those were jobs we could not even apply for. There were no black civil servants in the state. Unless, I take that back. Janitors were civil servants too, but there were certain jobs that you could not apply for. And so when I hear anger from some white voices about about conceding to black interests because you have a Martin Luther King holiday, even that argument is superficial to the purposes of the holidays. President's Day is supposed to be a day where we acknowledge the importance of people who become presidents.
Do you remember when President's Day was actually Washington's birthday on February 22nd and Lincoln's birthday on February 12th?
Yes, I do.
So we have now taken two individuals and made it just a day to recognize presidents. And the October 12th celebration of Columbus has now become kind of an Indigenous People Day, if I'm not incorrect. So I'm not sure a lot of people understand the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day.
I agree. I've had that discussion too.
So I think it's just very interesting that we started this conversation and we're finally starting to actually recognize that we have days off for things that we don't understand. Right.
And we don't appreciate or don't seem to appreciate the purpose for that day off. But isn't that human nature? I mean, Christmas is supposed to be a religious holiday, and yet it has merged with the cultures, with Nordic cultures who had a winter celebration, which was a mental health activity more than anything else, because they were snowed in for so long.
It's also interesting if we think about other countries who have 10, 15, sometimes 20 national days off to celebrate different things.
Yes.
And they truly take those days off, but they also take vacations, and they take the time to separate themselves from their place of work and actually do something that is non-work related. As you and I both know, the concept of paid time off or vacation, especially depending upon what level you are in the workforce, is something we ignore. And I'm just as bad as anybody. I mean, we go to the UK for 12 days and I bring my laptop with me and I don't disconnect. So the days that we're given off, which theoretically should be days of rest, well, let's just say we don't even have a day of rest, because theoretically Saturday is the Sabbath for one religion and Sunday is the day of prayer and religion for another religion. And how many people continue to work on those days too? So the American population is very interesting when it comes down to looking at days of acknowledgement and what we do with them.
That's a very poignant point in terms of how we are coming up with all these strategies for mental health, and the fact that we won't even allow ourselves. We have weekends, and yet most of us are driven to even work on weekends. And the Bible urges us to take Sabbath as a day of rest. And at least in the American culture, we have moved so far from some Jewish traditions that says you don't even cook on Sunday, or Saturday, excuse me. You do all your cooking on Friday so that you don't have to literally work. And in some houses, they take it to the point where even flipping a light switch is work.
Hey, I taught you.
How about that?
You can't teach an old doc new tricks.
Or you can see a mime when you can recognize a mime when you see it.
So, bottom line on the Juneteenth thing, it's a global admonition to learn more about these days of acknowledgement and what they mean and the history behind them, because our generation, Phil, and my generation, have done a really lousy job of passing it on to our children to understand them. And we're not always the best examples of how to recognize a day off from that standpoint.
I think the other subtle message is, not only do we want you to insert your self-interest in the meaning of these holidays, but to understand your self-interest from a mental health perspective, and find those days that you can fully engage with, so that you can truly rest and rejuvenate and celebrate.
So topic number 2, as we kind of throw crap at the wall: political assassinations in Minnesota. I mean, when is violence in general, but even more so political violence, acceptable? I mean, how do we get to this point?
Well, we've always been to this point now. Let's not act as if we suddenly took a left turn.
Cheers.
John F. Kennedy to Robert F. Kennedy to
Martin Luther
King,
Abraham Lincoln,
Medgar Evers, Abraham Lincoln. I think we have to understand that, as horrible and as atrocious as this event was, we also have to understand the environment in which it happened. And we should not make the mistake on either side of the political spectrum of extolling this as the example that the other side is wrong, or that this may have been, the real question you should ask is, why did this one man decide to wage war on political participants, political representatives, because they disagreed we assume because they disagreed in principle. They used to work together, so it could have become much more personal, and it may be no more than, this is how this person solves problems, just as husbands who beat their wives, or who train through violence, who train children through violence. This may be more a result of that than a political basis. I don't know, but I think it's dangerous for us to use this, even though it has political overtones, to use this as one party against the other, or as a reason to throw away the rule book because somebody isn't following the rule book. That's just my position right now. I find it abhorrent and atrocious. I find it is frightening, but we must find solace in our constitutional values, in our personal values, and we should let the facts lead us to whatever conclusions we need to make. I am more concerned about the fact that we are in an environment that is more likely to hide the facts from the general public than share them.
It is concerning, and it brings back gun awareness and the fact that the United States has one of the top gun homicide rates of any country in the world from that standpoint. And it, brings back the thoughts of the school shootings and everything else. And how can we address these issues without, what is it, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, without completely doing away with the Second Amendment. There's got to be some level of agreement and compromise that makes people comfortable, but decreases the number of violent gun deaths that we see in the United States.
Yes, everything you just said sounds good.
I know.
I'm just, I'm disappointed in our inability to address such an important issue without the conversation breaking down into egregious partisan position. This is a 50-something-year-old man who all our laws suggest should be able to handle a firearm for legal reasons. And this is a person of privilege, by the way, who should be able, what type of egregious injury does he use to defend his action? He essentially he was targeting 40. Yes, they happen to all be Democrats, but he was targeting a lot of people that he was going to hunt down and kill. That's hard to defend on any basis. That's a mass murderer. And so when we start talking about gun laws and gun restrictions, just as the public figures we mentioned before who were shot and killed, we have to admit that laws are not going to stop everything. And this isn't one of those cases where a child shot up a school. What is different about this is that there are political overtones here that says that this is how we solve political discourse. And so if you're questioning whether or not this was going to become a common tactic in political, discussions, I don't know. I don't think that there is a lot of appetite for that. But I do believe that there's a segment of our society who believes in tearing down the society. I don't know what this individual thought in that regard. Again, I'm more concerned with information freedom. Have you heard about the discussion between Jasmine Crockett and Judge Judy?
What are you on, TMZ right now? Jasmine Crockett and Judge Judy. No, I mean, if you're not watching the news and you're watching Judge Judy, we have a problem.
Well, I wasn't watching anything, and this is one of the things. I'll tell you why I raised this. Apparently, Jasmine Crockett, who is a Democratic representative from Texas, was a guest on CNN as in a town hall with Judge Judy, and the discussion was supposed to be about the legal system and justice. And Jasmine and Ms. Crockett made a comment about the legal system being biased, about laws that were discriminatorily applied. In particular, she mentioned that laws on drugs were designed to capture African people of color whose primary drug use was crack, and that there were exemptions for white people who primarily use cocaine. And Judge Judy inserted herself and said, I have been in this business for 40 years and I have made many decisions, and it's all about justice. And this is another argument about lack of accountability. Well, apparently in the discussion, Judge Judy attacked Ms. Crockett's knowledge, experience, used the fact that she was a freshman representative with less than a year's experience as part of her argument, and that she had been in this system for 40 years as a judge. And then Ms. Crockett responded with facts. She responded with numbers, and then reminded the judge that she was a lawyer herself, and that she had been a judge in courtrooms for 20 years, and that her experience in Congress had nothing to do with the facts that she was spouting. I described all that because I learned about it while I was writing something. And you know how sometimes you get caught up, you end up in this little commercial where people are describing a scene. Well, I first learned of this when they were with people describing the conversation and describing the environment. Well, I wanted to hear the tape. Now, apparently, Miss Crockett took Judge Judy and wiped her up and down the hall with her facts to the point that she converted a very conservative audience to her side, and supposedly the tape went viral. I can't find the tape.
Really? It's on YouTube all over the place.
I went to YouTube. What's on YouTube are the descriptions.
Oh, so you're looking for the verbatim event, not.
I want to hear it for myself.
Got it.
I can't find the tape. I have searched for a week, and I've heard different versions every time I click on it when I think I see the tape. But even on YouTube, you don't see a picture of either of them in the town hall. I can't find it on CNN. I can't find it anywhere. And that bothers me.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is the first I've heard of it. So is your question basically the editing of content and taking it down, basically editing of the facts? Because that's really what's happening if you're taking down a recorded program.
Right. I am suspicious.
Okay.
I am very suspicious. I cannot make an outright accusation other than I can't find the tape. And why wouldn't I be able to?
Yeah.
If it's true, then someone is protecting somebody's reputation. If it's true, then either that, or if it's true, somebody is trying to take down public acknowledgement of facts that they cannot denounce, which is similar to taking books like 1619 out of the library, so that there's fewer and fewer factual resources you can depend on to counter specious narratives.
Interesting. Well, that was not a direction of our conversation I expected to go today. Totally. But that's what this conversation was today. Now I'm going to do my due diligence after we get off. And, I was thinking more of Judge Jeannie from Fox and Crockett going after, not Judge Judy. But that's going to be my research when we get done today is trying to find that original so I can send it to you.
I would appreciate that. I've done everything but contact CNN directly.
So all of our listeners, if any of you happen to have the tape that you recorded on your DVR, send it to Phil. So let's hit two things quickly, because the Minnesota assassinations happen to be on Flag Day, June 14th. Yes. And June 14th this year had more going on than typically goes on with Flag Day. Flag Day tends to be a day that is on the calendar, but just kind of gets glossed over. Just another one of those holidays to look up and figure out. Because on June 14th, we had an event in Washington, D.C. to recognize the military. And we had an event in over 2,000 cities recognizing discomfort and distrust with the current political environment, called No Kings Marches. Both of those were going on in many cases concurrently, and they both reflected political positions in many ways. One more specifically, peaceful demonstrations in opposition to some of the positions and activities that were going on from Washington, D.C., and the other reflecting on Flag Day, military parade, and the current president's birthday. So there was a lot going on June 14th. No shortage of that. And then we could throw in the PGA Championship that was being played in Oakmont. But, if you want to get an overload of news, just look at a day with those events going on. Now, Phil, I was at one of the No Kings events. I believe you were as well. It reminded me of the events that I attended with my parents during the Vietnam War in the 60s and early 70s. I have to believe that you had some similar sort of events that you attended in a peaceful protest when you were growing up as well. Would that be correct?
I wish I could say yes. For the most part, it did. Yes, it did engender memories. However, the character of the protest during the Civil Rights Movement that I participated in, this is the first time I thought about this, that you made me think about this. The No Kings protestations occurred after the president sent Marines to LA for the ICE raids to defend the building that they took the victims of the ICE raids to, under the guise that he was protecting LA when all he was protecting were federal buildings, and under the guise that he had to step in because of incompetent governance and incompetent police work by inference there. And I notice that every protest we have now, when it turns dark, becomes violent.
And when you say dark, you mean sunset going?
Sunset dark.
Yes.
Yes. When the day becomes night, when it becomes dark, the people become dark in their tactics. And the people that tend to start it are usually the people that are just fed up, but not necessarily the people that organized the event, or the majority of the people that showed up for the event. And I was dismayed at how our president tried to take that and paint it as a caricature of all of the people who were participating in the protest. But the fact that violence occurred at the end of some of those protests is similar to what happened in the civil rights movement. The difference, however, is during the civil rights movement, most of the violence was perpetrated by the police because of the penal authority that they used in order to control protesters that they did not respect. And so my comparison of the two is a little different than yours. I did see that in the end of these civic activities, violence ended up punctuating those activities, but for different reasons.
In the face of the polarization that you've noted and the disagreements that exist between neighbors, the fact that there has been less violence in Los Angeles than one might expect, and considering the millions of people who were parts of these No Kings events, the outcomes in terms of voicing opinion and sharing discomfort, I think were actually fairly peaceful. And I think what's going on in LA, which many might have expected to escalate and blow up into not George Floyd, Rodney King 2 or Watts 2 or whatever the case, I think that the Los Angelenos who have been involved have actually been very restrained in their response.
I totally agree. I am proud of the fact that we had demonstrations throughout California, indeed the nation, with millions of people participating and relatively little violence. I'm also how do I put this? I must also acknowledge the change in police tactics in addressing even non-conforming behavior short of violence of the participants. And I must commend the LA police and the state troopers in their restraint and in their attempt to balance between the right to protest and the protection of property and the lives of others.
Now, would you add the state troopers, the LA police, the National Guard, and the Marines, and you recognize the self-control that occurred on all parties? I got to be pretty proud of what's been going on so far in terms of those conversations.
I have to accept that, even though my anger at the president for sending the troops into LA colored my judgment. But then I also care about the fact that he sent in National Guardsmen with no preparation. They had to sleep on the floor of the building that they were protecting. There was no care for them. It showed his imperialistic mind that he has tools to use. He has two armies. He has a civilian army that raided the Capitol on January 6th, and now he has official control of American forces. And he only talks about lives and his concern about lives when it seems to be politically favorable to him. He made a comment in an interview recently that, of course, this is at an airport so that he can walk away the moment the questions get too complicated. But he made a comment that what he cares about between Ukraine and Russia is lives. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying every month on both sides. It kind of sounds like there are good people on both sides here. And he wants to stop the war to save the lives, even if it means Ukraine has to give up some land, and that's what it means. But his whole concern is about lives. And yet, when he talks about Israel and the Gaza Strip, he's not concerned about lives. He hasn't mentioned his concern about lives in Gaza yet. He sees Gaza as a potential resort that he can spend $16 billion on and turn it into a shining ornament for the United States. When he talks about Iran and Israel, he doesn't mention his concern about lives. He only mentions that they should have come to the table in the 60 days he gave. This was, I admit that what your compliments of the police forces and how they dealt with the protests was appropriate. And I agree with you. And I'm somewhat embarrassed that I wasn't able to say it myself.
Don't be embarrassed. So I'm going to take
my own bias.
I'm going to throw one curveball at you, and then we're going to wrap up.
Okay.
And you're never going to see this one coming. What do you think about the Lakers selling half of their assets to the owner of the Dodgers?
Okay. So first of all, I didn't know that. And who is the owner of the Dodgers? I thought they had multiple owners.
They do, but the group that is led by, and I don't know his name off the top of my head, which includes Magic Johnson, they're buying a large portion of the Lakers from the Buss family. So I think it was 50% or more. But, when you live in LA, that's headline news.
I understand. I actually don't think much about that. And, I would use the old statement that's above my pay grade. But, I guess on the one hand, because of the multiple owners that the Dodgers have, because of the multi-glomerate that it is versus a family-owned place, for LA, this could be great because they definitely they should, especially with the Dodgers' success lately, they should be able to infuse more resources into the Lakers.
So Mark Walter is the primary owner of the Dodgers. They're spending $10 billion, which, Phil, is above your pay grade.
That's what I thought.
Barely. But anyhow, I just thought I'd throw a curveball at you because there's so many other things we can talk about. But it was just kind of fun, kind of going through the news and touching on different things. And I think it goes back to this conversation that we've been having, which is just pay attention, be part of the conversation, listen to other people, and don't be afraid to peacefully express your position, because that's what this is all about. That's what democracy is all about, is to be able to share your thoughts and be able to listen to others and be able to, at the end, agree to disagree and shake hands and walk away.
So I definitely agree. I think we haven't touched on a lot of the issues we discussed in our pre-talk in terms of some of the details of the No Kings protest and some of the surprising views that we came back with as a result of the merging groups that resulted in the No Kings protest. But that's for another podcast.
Yeah, no, I think we did a good job today of doing a monkey chat, throwing some crap at the wall and seeing what stuck. So
yeah, I'd rather use the term scatter chat, but that's okay.
All right, well, how about scat?
Scat Chat. That sounds good.
Let's call that Scat Chat. So, Nicole, today's talk is entitled Scat Chat. And thank you, Phil, for indulging me.
You're quite welcome, my friend. And to our listeners, thank you for indulging us. And we hope that through our discussion, you might be exposed to perspectives that you had not considered before. And we hope that if you have different opinions that you think we are blind to, we'd appreciate it if you would send those thoughts to us. And Peter, you want to tell them where they can send it to?
Well, you can put it. No, you can go to our website at www.peterandphil.com, and I think there's a comments area there. And most of you know how to reach either Phil or myself as needed. So please stay in touch. Please let us know how we can be of assistance to you, and share your thoughts with us, and look for us at the AVMA in July. Hopefully, I'm not sure whether this will be released before then or not, but we'll be doing live versions of Courageous Conversations in DC in July. And we'd love to have you there as our audience and to ask difficult questions. So until then, be well, be strong, and be courageous.
Thank you for joining us for another Courageous Conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.